What if I told you that the most powerful and terrifying villain in Stephen King's entire multiverse might actually be Stephen King himself? Today, we're exploring a fascinating theory that the Crimson King, the ultimate antagonist of King's universe, could be an avatar of the author himself, either consciously created or unconsciously manifested within his own work. This idea of King creating a dark version of himself isn't without precedent in his work. In his 1989 novel, The Dark Half, King tells the story of Thad Beaumont, a writer who must confront George Stark, his own evil pseudonym, come to life. Stark represents everything dark and dangerous about Beaumont's creativity. He's literally the author's shadow self made flesh. King wrote this novel partly as a response to the revelation of his own pseudonym, Richard Bachman, but it speaks to a deeper truth about how King views the relationship between authors and their darker creations. Just as Beaumont must face his dark half in George Stark, perhaps the Crimson King represents King's own dark reflection, the shadow cast by his creative power, the destructive force that exists alongside the ability to create entire universes. Now, this is purely speculative, a fun literary theory to help us see this character in a new light. But the evidence is surprisingly compelling. Before we dive into our theory, let's understand exactly who the Crimson King is. At the center of King's multiverse stands the Dark Tower, a cosmic axis that holds all realities together. Think of it as the nexus point where all possible worlds intersect. Every version of every story, every parallel universe, every level of reality stacked one upon another, like the floors of an infinite building. The story of the tower began with Robert Browning's poem, Childe Roland to the Dark Tower Came, and through King's imagination grew into something far more vast and terrifying. The tower itself exists in a place between realities, a linchpin holding together not just different worlds, but different levels of existence. There's our world, where Stephen King writes his books. Then there are the worlds within his books. Then there are worlds within those worlds, stories within stories, realities branching endlessly like the roots of some cosmic tree. And at the very top of this hierarchy of realities sits the author himself, Stephen King, the ultimate creator who can reach down through all these layers of reality and reshape them at will. Born from the unholy union of Arthur Eld, a legendary gunslinger, and the demonic Crimson Queen, the Crimson King emerged from the Prim, the primordial chaos that existed before the universe took shape. Just as King himself emerges from the chaos of imagination to shape his stories, the Crimson King emerges from the Prim to reshape reality itself. His power set is staggering, near omnipotence across dimensions, necromancy, dark magic, shape, shifting, mass mind control that can reach across worlds. His power rivals that of other cosmic entities in King's universe, such as Gun, the creator force, and the turtle Maturin. Yet even these godlike beings exist within the framework that King himself created. The scope of his influence is almost unlimited. The deadlights that gave Pennywise its power? Those belong to the Crimson King, Randall Flagg, the walking denim man who brought civilization to its knees in The Stand. Merely a powerful pawn in the Crimson King's game. Throughout King's works, he appears in different forms. In Insomnia, as a being with blazing red eyes. In Black House, as the master manipulator harvesting children with special abilities. In the final Dark Tower book in royal regalia that barely contains his horrifying true form. Like King himself, who can shift between genres and styles, from horror to fantasy to crime thriller, the Crimson King is a shapeshifter who adapts to whatever form the story requires. But there's another fascinating pattern in King's work that suggests how deeply personal these stories are: the recurring appearance of characters named Donald. This might seem trivial at first, until you realize that Donald was the name of King's father, who abandoned the family when Stephen was very young. These Donalds appear throughout his works like ghost impressions. Donald Elbert in The Stand, and every man trying to survive the apocalypse. Donald Moen in Needful Things, a good man corrupted by dark forces. Donald Dopey Haldeman in It, one of the bullies tormenting the main characters, even a phantom. Like Donald in Hearts in Atlantis, who exists only as a memory in another character's mind. Each Donald seems to represent a different possible version of the father he barely knew. The ordinary man, the corrupted soul, the antagonist, the ghost of memory. It's as if King is working through his own trauma by creating and recreating versions of his absent father across his multiverse. King's self-insertion into his work isn't limited to these ghostly Donalds or potential cosmic avatars. His bibliography is filled with writer characters who often serve as more obvious avatars. Jack Torrance in The Shining, Paul Sheldon in Misery, Bill Denbrough in It. These characters tend to represent visible human aspects of King's experience, his struggles with writer's block, addiction, fame, and fear. The parallels become even more intriguing when you realize that not only do they share the same last name, King, but Stephen King and Crimson King both contain exactly 11 letters. This kind of symmetry between creator and creation, right down to the letter count, feels almost too perfect to be coincidental in a universe so concerned with patterns and parallels. Perhaps most tellingly, King wrote much of the Dark Tower series during periods of severe alcohol and drug addiction, describing the writing process as almost channeling an outside force. Could the Crimson King, this force of chaos and destruction, represent King's own battles with his inner demons? The tower itself might represent King's creative works, his stability, his very identity as an author. Just as addiction threatens to tear down everything in one's life, the Crimson King seeks to destroy the structure holding reality together. Yet, if the Crimson King represents King's presence within his fictional universe, he's still not the most powerful force at work. Because while the Crimson King may rule within the boundaries of the fiction, the author himself operates on an even higher level of reality, the ultimate reality beyond all others. Think about it. The Crimson King may be able to move between different levels of the tower, between different versions of reality, but Stephen King exists in a realm above even that, the realm of the ultimate creator. The Crimson King may want to destroy the Dark Tower, but King could simply choose not to write it at all. This suggests the Crimson King might represent not just King himself, but perhaps King's awareness of his own godlike power as an author, and the terrible responsibility that comes with it. Authors embedding themselves in their stories isn't new. From Kurt Vonnegut appearing in Breakfast of Champions to Grant Morrison writing himself into Animal Man as a god-like figure. But what makes King's possible self, Insertion as the Crimson King, so fascinating is its cosmic scale and ambiguity. This isn't just an author writing himself into his story. This is an author potentially creating a dark reflection of his own creative power, a manifestation of both the glory and terror of having godlike control over entire universes. The fact that we can't know for certain whether these connections were intentional, unconscious, or simply compelling coincidences only adds to their intrigue. Much like the Tower itself, King's work contains endless levels of possible meaning to explore. Whether it's the cosmic scale insertion of the Crimson King, the recurring ghosts of his father in characters named Donald, or the more obvious writer avatars, King's work seems to function as a vast therapeutic landscape where personal demons can be confronted, explored, and perhaps even exorcised through the act of storytelling. Thanks for watching this deep dive into our theory about the Crimson King's true identity. If you enjoyed this analysis, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us create more content like this. We've got fascinating videos coming up about other meta elements in King's work and the significance of authors appearing in their own stories. So make sure you don't miss those. Let me know in the comments. Do you think the Crimson King was intentionally created as King's dark reflection? Or did this parallel emerge unconsciously from the creative process? I read all your comments and love hearing your theories. See you in the next video.